Hi and welcome, my name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be a rant about Lightroom. Well, actually it's going to be about developing an image that wasn't exposed very well. Now this was taken with evaluative metering, ISO 100, pointed it at the sun. Obviously the dynamic range was so much, my camera didn't know what to do, so made the sky expose well, but basically everything else was rubbish. Now, it's raw. I could probably do a lot with it just by pressing auto on the tone and auto for the white balance. And I'm going to do that in a minute. But what I did with this image first is I took it into Photoshop. Now, it's a raw file. I took it into a Smart Object, duplicated the Smart Object layer twice, and then I played around with Adobe Camera Raw to simulate having shot with different exposures, like using exposure bracketing. Then I used luminosity masks and layer masks, etc., and blending techniques and a lot of other techniques to sort of bring it up to scratch. Now, it was quite advanced work. I've used Photoshop for a long, long time. So, you know, it took quite a while and I'm quite quick with Photoshop. So I thought, well, this is not really fair on people because most people, you know, a lot of people, I should say, use Lightroom. And I use Lightroom Classic. So a lot of photographers use Lightroom Classic. So I thought, well, we got the luminance mask via the range mask in Lightroom. Why don't I do it with Lightroom? And I did. That's not perfect, but it took so long because everything took so long to render on my screen. The adjustment brush in particular, the lag on it was so bad that it was a swearing fest in the end. So I'm going to re-record this video and go through the process again of trying to develop that image there to the point where it looks something similar to that. But honestly, I will never do it again. Now, if you've got a better system than me, this is a 4-year-old Mac with 16 gig of RAM. If you've got a new Windows computer, maybe, just maybe, it'll work for you. I don't believe this is a fault of Apple. I think this Mac is fine. But this is a common machine. A lot of people in the world own 27-inch iMacs that, let's say, 4 years old, like mine. So there's a lot of people in my boat. And when I come to develop this image, you'll see why I don't use Lightroom much anymore, and I'm seriously thinking about going over to Affinity. And what I've seen is a lot of Affinity users out there have not regretted it, especially photographers, because I use most Adobe products. I give them £60 a month. I like Adobe Premiere Pro, only for sort of using for these videos, and I like Adobe Audition. I've learnt it. I've learnt a bit of After Effects and I use Dreamweaver. So I use a lot of their products for fun. I'm not making my living out of using Adobe products, but I'm giving them £60 a month. If I was making a living, I definitely wouldn't be with Adobe. Honestly, I'm thinking about leaving Adobe. So let's take this image I did in Lightroom and reset it, which is Command and Control Shift R. I'm sorry about this rant, but you'll see why I got into a state. Now, if you've got a better system, this will still work for you. This will be about developing this image, but I want to show you the problems I had. So go ahead and try and emulate what I've done. If you get those problems, complain to Adobe. So the first thing I do with an image like this, make sure I'm in Develop Module, lose the film strip because I don't need it, lose the toolbar T on my keyboard. I like using keyboard shortcuts, not to show off because I've got a bad hand and elbow. So I try and use the mouse and Wacom tablet as little as possible. I'm on my mouse today. So for auto tone and auto white balance, Command and Control U, which is auto tone. Command and Control Shift U is auto white balance. So I've done that. So this is what Adobe Camera Raw or, you know, Lightroom thinks is a balanced exposure, given this was extremely dark and there's a very high dynamic range. So I didn't shoot with exposure bracketing, so I've got this one image to sort of develop. Now we've got luminance masks in the tools, graduated filter, adjustment brush, and a radio filter tool. You know, you're emulating using luminosity masks inside of Photoshop. So why should you go into Photoshop? Well, I'll show you why when I start editing this image. So what I'm going to do firstly is just bring up the shadows a bit. By the way, if you use the period and comma key, or full stop if you're in the UK, notice that little message it tells you. So if I go back up to exposure, or even tint and temperature, then it says use the plus or minus. So I often do that. So period key, it's easy to say, so I won't say full stop anymore. I'm going to go down to shadows and press the plus or equals key to brighten up the shadows, like so. So anyway, plus to increase the shadows. It's looking like AstroTurf, but you can't have everything, so I'll leave it like that. I think overall the image looks okay. I might just jump a bit of clarity in as well, just to help it along, but it makes that look a bit crunchy, but 15 is fine. A tiny amount of dehaze, so I think that's fine. So there's no color cast, I think that's pretty good. A tiny amount of lens flare there, click down. I went Q for the spot healing brush. It's on heal, best one to be on. Q to get rid of it. So the obvious thing is I want to bring that sky down. So that's a graduated filter. Now, M on your keyboard, shift key kept pressed to constrain it to 90 degrees as you drag it down. Now, I'm going to put the range mask on, put it on luminance, turn the mask on. So we can see what we're affecting straight away. You can see I'm affecting that building, which is a medieval lighthouse, by the way. So really, I need to take that effect away. So what I will do is bring the range up so it only affects the brighter pixels from 57% grey here to 100, which is white. So it seems to have worked, but it's also sucked out the mask or sucked out the effect from the sky. So I could bring the smoothness up like so and see what happens. You know, it's difficult to see the red there, but I don't think there's much of a red tinge. Now, if I take the range back down, I'm taking a risk. And there'll be a point when I'm putting red and I can see it actually in that building now. So I'm going to bring it up to about 53. Top tip, F7. Go to one of these 1 to 8 or 1 to 16 ones. Come here and drag down a little bit more. So you can go outside the canvas. Bit of a cheat there. So back to fit. F7 to lose that left-hand side panel. I think I've got there. I just wanted to affect that some more. So luminance mask off. I don't have to worry about this building and the foreground. So down goes the exposure. Big danger here. Take the exposure right down and you'll see what I mean. You're making it look like everything's blown out. So ironically, it makes it look worse when you take the exposure, double click to zero it, and the highlights down. You know, you do the same thing. So be careful. Sometimes I actually put the highlights up like so, make it brighter, but bring the overall exposure down. And that seems to work better. So I'm seeing that God sky, the shafts of light appear, which I was really after, really. So I'm getting there, and I'm probably not going to go much further than that. I'm leaving it at that. Now I'm looking and thinking it's all about color and clarity now for me. So I might bring the clarity up a bit. Now dehaze could have a bad effect because sometimes it darkens colors down. Well, in fact, it does. But I'm trying it a little bit. I don't want that too dark, ironically. And I might warm it up here a little bit as well. I don't want it too blue at the top. So anyway, I'm looking now thinking bit of clarity, bit of dehaze, a bit more saturation just to give it a little bit of oomph. I like it quite cold. I've got no problems with that at all. Noise, moire and defringe, or maybe a bit of defringe in case there's a problem around the edges of that building there. But that's about it, really. So I'm going to leave that graduated filter alone. Now, in the old days, if I'd done that without the luminance mask, I would have to get the brush on a raise and paint it away from that building there. With the range mask on luminance, I don't have to do that anymore. There's a tiny bit of red there, so, you know, I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm just painting away now to make sure it's definitely not on that building. There was a tiny bit of red, so it was there. The effect is probably, you know, hardly there, really, if I'm playing around with the graduated filter. But just to ensure it isn't, I've just done that. Right. Let's turn off the graduated filter. M on your keyboard to lose it. And it'll take a while. As you can see, this is the problem with Lightroom. 3 or 4 seconds, but that's not real-time editing as far as I'm concerned. So I need to use the adjustment brush to brighten this building up. It looks a bit strange, it looks a bit HDR, but I've got to try my best to give it some depth and make it brighter. And that will be very difficult considering there's a hell of a lot of noise in those dark areas there. A hell of a lot. Even though I shot with ISO 100, the camera was being pushed to its limits. So K for the adjustment brush, and I'm looking at it now. And before you can see the mask, you have to paint down. So I'm just going to paint straight down like that. let it catch up, and it will have to catch up. I've got the spinning ball. You won't see that in this video because my screen recording software doesn't record things like the spinning ball. So I now can put the range mask on, because I've done something, on luminance and make sure it's ticked to see where I've painted. I'm not going to be too fussy about painting this because we don't have time. So what I'm going to do is make sure the actual brush is on flow of 100 and density of 100, and put the size up with the right-hand square bracket key. Auto mask on, so I should be following the edge of the building, but I'll have problems down below, I know that. And at this right-hand edge, because it wasn't very well defined. Now, you could argue I could use a range mask on this based on luminance, given that this is quite a dark building. That is going to happen probably, because if I get any leaks, luminance leaks, because it's going to the outside, I'm very careful not to go to the edges deliberately. As long as the whole building's mainly caught, I've got into the edge slightly there. Alt Option key kept pressed. I have to use the right-hand Alt Option key because I want to use the square bracket keys to make it smaller. But when you press the Alt Option key, it swaps between the erase brush and the A and B brush, depending what brush you're using previously. So I'm going to bring down the size a bit more and just paint that away. I haven't got auto mask on because I don't want it on, because I think it will confuse things slightly. I'm just going to paint back a little area there and just straight down. So what I'm going to do now is turn off the luminance mask. Now, if I did leak over, I could limit the range of the luminance mask by making sure it's only affecting the dark areas. When I come to paint that area there, you will see why I get annoyed. So I'm going to lift the exposure, but I'm going to use the method of clicking in the box and using the up arrow. So I'm going to go up to about 40. Now, this is where the catch-up takes its time. I think that's more than far enough. I might take it down to 30, 0.30. Contrast, I do need contrast, but it's a crude tool. But I'm going to drop it, or bring it up, I should say. Shift and up arrow to 16. Now, highlights, I can actually use the up and down arrows. So I'm bringing the highlights up a bit, even though there's not a lot of highlights in there. Shadows, I might, I'm going to bring them up a bit. Not too much, because you will take away contrast from the object you're doing it on. So you've got to be extremely careful. Clarity, click on clarity, up and down arrow. This is a very good tool, but because there's a lot of noise here and I'm raising up the mid-tone contrast, it could be problematic. And I'm starting to see that now. What I might do is use temp and warm it up to match almost the sunset, because it won't look too much out of place. So I'm warming it up quite quickly now and having a look, and let it play catch up. Too much. Around 10. I'm going to leave it around 10. So it doesn't look too out of context, even though it probably was. I'm going to sharpen it a bit because that might help them. Tons of noise in it, but you know, it's a textured surface. It's stone, so the noise won't be particularly seeable, or it won't matter. That's what I'm saying. Now, I want to get rid of that now. I'm going to close it down. I'm not going to do any more on that. I'm going to paint in this area here. So I need the adjustment brush again. So K on my keyboard. As I said before, I need to do something first. So one streak, let it catch up. Spinning ball of death. Spinning ball of death. It's finally worked. Range mask on luminance. So I'm going to see it in red now when I tick the box. Took its time. Now I want to paint around here. My cursors are way ahead of the paint. I've got auto mask on, so I just want to, paint around that area there. It's got a very obvious edge. It should keep to it, but because I haven't got real-time editing because of the lag, I've got massive problems. Now, I'm showing you the whole technique because for you, it might work. For me, I'd rather be in Photoshop with something that doesn't have this huge lag. Spinning ball of death. You can see it's catching up. I've done anything. I'll paint there quickly. Let's see how long it takes to fill that area up. So I can't use real-time editing. This is why I'm getting so goddamn angry. Now, I've spilt over there, so Alt key. Let's paint that away and see how long this takes to catch up. Well, a couple of seconds, maybe a second and a half. Turn the luminance mask off. I don't think colour or luminance would help me. I can see that the image isn't quite rendered properly quite yet, but sometimes it can take 3 or 4 minutes to render properly on my screen. So what I'm going to do with this is put the saturation and clarity up, and maybe to put the exposure up a tiny bit. Click in there, go down a little bit more, maybe up a bit more. But the lag is, look, see the lag, see I've moved it. It's 2 or 3 seconds, but I want complete real-time editing. You know, this is image editing software that shouldn't be doing this. So I'm going to take it down because it jumped such a huge amount very quickly, because I didn't realize it was going to do that, because I'm not getting the feedback. So this is why I'm getting frustrated. Let's go to contrast and see if that will help a bit as well. I think that's fair enough, because obviously the camera didn't catch that well. It's a bit soft. I was on 5.6 aperture, but I don't think that would matter, because it's, you know, the focal plane wouldn't matter at that distance. That's about 5-6 miles away when it's over there, even a bit more. So that's the edit, guys. Now, I hope you got something from the edit and the rant about Adobe stage, because it's got far worse than this when I was doing other things with this image. So I'm going to leave it at that. So what I'm going to do now is put it in loop view by pressing E. So it's back to the library module. Now look how long it's taking to render on screen. This is what I'm going on about, guys. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 minutes. Now, don't tell me in the comments, because I'm allowing comments on this video, that you need to check your settings in Lightroom. I've been using Lightroom for 6 years. I've also been using Adobe products like Photoshop since 1995. I do know what I'm doing, but look at this. It's not rendering on screen. What I have to do, oh, it's finally rendered on screen. So what I'm going to do now, F6, I'm going to do a comparison. Command click on the one I did in Photoshop, and I will do a video on that soon, how I did the one in Photoshop, because I'm doing more and more luminosity masking videos now. I've decided, because I do a lot of landscape, it's relevant to landscape photography. Anyway, C for compare. Right, I need to change the values there. That's the Photoshop one on the right, and that's the Lightroom one on the left. If you notice, it still hasn't rendered properly on screen. That one's sharp, that one isn't. This is what I'm up against. It will get there eventually, but I can't compare something that's not rendered on my screen straight away. I'm using my graphics processor properly. It's supported. You know, all the performance things I've done, and nothing is making it work better. I really, you know, don't believe this. So if I go back to grid and maybe do it like this, deselect, select. By the way, Adobe, having light grey for selection is not really good. You should pick another colour like pink or something, because it's difficult to spot when you've got the whole grid filled up. So anyway, that's another moan. I'm not having a good day, am I? That's the Photoshop one. I accidentally zoomed on that. So that's the Lightroom one. Not that bad, but you can see the troubles I had. Adobe, you really need to do something about this. Now, Google are getting rid of Google Plus because it doesn't work. Maybe you should get rid of Lightroom. It doesn't work. I know the world's going towards mobile technology and you're always trying to keep up with that. I understand that. So Lightroom CC is like a lightweight classic, really, with storage. But, you know, I'm not paying £60 a month for Adobe products, all of them, because I don't use Premiere Pro that much. I don't use Audition that much. I don't use Dreamweaver that much. I don't use XD at all because I don't like it at the moment. But what I'm saying is I'm paying for the whole lot, but I mainly do photography and I mainly do these type of videos. And you're not giving me a product that works. So why should I do videos on Lightroom? The performance is this pants. This is why I've done this video. So maybe someone from Adobe will listen to this and admit they've got a problem and scrap Lightroom and come out with something different. And if that's just got to be Bridge and Photoshop, then so be it. Having smart previews and all these other bells and whistles is great. I know you can edit without having the actual images on the hard drive. I love smart previews. I like those things. But having huge catalog files and huge smart preview files eating up your system for this, it's not good enough. That's it, guys. Thanks very much.